and week 0. And we're going to have some of my burning questions going into the season. We're going to start in Dublin for the opener, EJ. Is Florida State closer to competing for the title or missing the playoff?
Well, man, I think they're closer to competing for the title, one, because of the returners on defense. They're going to have a really strong defensive line being led by Patrick Payton, also Joshua Farmer, Darrell Jackson. I mean, these guys are stout up front, as well as Marvin Jones Jr. And I know everybody has a big question about DJU. I think this is a great fit for DJU, one, because he's with Mike Norvell. And if you looked how Norvell was able to mature Jordan Travis over 2 years, you can have the same thing with DJU in year 1.
All right, so Dan, we're going to stick with Florida State. 2-part question. One, is Florida State the best team in the ACC in your mind? And which team, if they are, is the biggest threat to Florida State in the ACC?
Yeah, I agree with EJ. I do think that Florida State is closer, and they're the best team in the ACC. Specific, Mike Norvell with DJU. When DJ transferred to Oregon State, it was like the play-action game helped him. Is he going to implement that a little bit? But in the conference, we got to respect Clemson and Miami. Specifically to Miami, the close losses. Can they get rid of those? This is a football team that talent-wise, that Cam Ward transfers over, Damian Martinez transfers over. They've gotten in their own way so consistently. Can they get rid of that? And Clemson, Cade Klubnik at quarterback was the superstar recruit. He was the next guy, and it hasn't happened yet. Does he take that next step forward? Barrett Carter at linebacker is fantastic. Those two teams are still talented enough to contend with Florida State.
Yeah, I love the Miami pick. I think Virginia Tech's going to be a sleeper in the ACC. I find this conference one of the most entertaining coming into this new 12-team playoff era. Okay, the next burning question, Dan, is for you. Which team is under the most pressure to win the title this season?
Yeah, it's Ohio State, and it's not even close. Let me say this. If something happened with Ryan Day at Ohio State, basically everybody in college football and a ton of teams in the NFL would be lined up to interview him. They're two-headed back. TreVeyon Henderson and Judkins is unreal. Will Howard transfers over. They might have the best receiver trio in college football with Egbuka, Tate, and Jeremiah Smith. Like, this talent, the talent on this roster is absolutely loaded. They got to go win it.
Yeah, and EJ, look, I think the Ryan Day hot seat talk is absolutely ludicrous.
Stupid.
But do you believe it's now or never for Ryan Day in Columbus?
Yeah, it's now. I mean, when you look at this team and also the aggression in the portal, even getting Caleb Downs, he had 107 tackles for Alabama last year and also 2 interceptions. So now you show up the defense as well as guys like Will Howard, like Dan just mentioned. So it has to be now. And look, if you can go 11-1 years on in, that's a hell of a season. I don't care who you are at any level of football. That's really hard to do. So the hot seat conversation, I think, is also very silly. But I do get it, because if you lose to your rival, it almost seems like you didn't do anything the entire season unless you win the title. I think Ohio State has every single piece they need to get to a championship game and also win it. And like I said, with that quarterback, you should have a lot of experience there.
You could also argue outside of Georgia, if not as much as Georgia, Ohio State has the most talent in the country,
no doubt,
hands down. Okay, burning question time again. Yep. We're going to do this with Dan. Dan, which team in your mind is the biggest threat to Georgia in the SEC?
I'm going to go and roll the dice on old Lane Kiffin down in Oxford. They got transfers galore, which has kind of been their DNA recently. Jackson Dart at quarterback has played a ton of football for them. They've got 3 offensive linemen that are transferring over. And I think their defense, just because of the experience, they're going to have one person on their defense start that's not a senior in college football. They have a ton of talent matched with a boatload of experience.
Look, and the Ole Miss with the quarterback coming back, the 12-team playoff, Lane Kiffin is set up perfect for this. Alabama, though, we haven't talked about them yet. Paul Feinbaum and Stephen A. had a spirited debate on the Tide's playoff chances yesterday.
Alabama has a good team, Stephen A. You and I agree on that. But the world of college football now revolves around Georgia, not Alabama. They're good. They have players, but the dynasty's over. And quite frankly, Stephen A., it's been over for a couple of years. And while I think they'll make the playoffs, they better. Because can you imagine Alabama not being in the first 12-team playoff? Well, I think
that ain't going to happen. I mean, why would you even mention that? That is impossible.
What?
I mean, Alabama not making a 12-team playoff field? That's impossible. I mean, why would you even bring that up?
Rare's the day I'm on the same side of Stephen A. Smith in a college football argument. But, EJ, where you stand, does Alabama miss the playoff?
Hey, Matt, that's impossible. Alabama is not going to miss the playoff. And look, the big reason why is Jalen Milroe. If you go back and watch him last season, he still completed 65% of his passes. But also now you bring in Kalen DeBoer, who was able to help develop Michael Penix Jr., end up being a top 10 pick. And also not even just the fact of the skill at quarterback, offensive line. If you look at the offensive lines under Kalen DeBoer, they've done an excellent job of protecting the passer. Milroe was sacked, I believe, 41 times last season, and now you bring in that kind of mindset to protect him. You shore up the defensive side of the ball as well. I still think Alabama has every single piece they need to get to a playoff, and it starts with Jalen Milroe.
Orlovsky.
Yeah, totally agree with EJ. Hey, Feinbaum, they lost on the last play of the game to the eventual national champion, who one of the better teams we've seen in college football over the last decade. So to say like the dynasty's been over, they literally lost on the last play of the game. I think Alabama, Jalen Milroe is a guy that, Field Yates mentioned this to me the other day. If you were looking for a quarterback that might take that maybe Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels type of leap, Jalen's got that in his game. The physical talent, the ability to continue to develop, the character that goes along with that work ethic. And EJ's touched on it. Kalen DeBoer, he doesn't get bad quarterback play. That's one of the things he only does, or does at an incredibly high level, is develop quarterbacks. And I think Jalen has that chance to take that giant leap. And if he does that, then Alabama continues to be one of those top 5, 6, 7 teams unquestionably in college football. He's right that it revolves around Georgia.
First-round pick and Heisman Trophy candidate. Maybe we'll see that with Milroe.
Exactly.
All right, EJ, another team missing is the Texas Longhorns we haven't talked about yet. Texas fresh off a playoff berth last season. Got to be a little quicker on this one. Should we expect to see Texas back in the playoff this season?
Yeah, we should. And I think it's going to be a little harder just because they're now in the SEC. And you just imagine how many spots is the SEC going to get in the college football playoff. But Texas brings back a great starter at QB. Quinn Ewers, I love his game. He certainly has grown throughout his time when he even started at Ohio State and now there in that team in Austin. But I expect Coach Sarkisian to have this team ready to go. Also, Isaiah Bond also helping that offense. They'll be back in the playoff.
Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, Steve Sarkisian to me is very similar to Ryan Day, one of the best offensive minds in all of college football. Quinn Ewers coming back is huge in his maturity that we kind of watched develop last season. He went from a question mark, an unknown, to now we expect this young man to play himself into a top 10 NFL draft pick. And when you have a guy like that at quarterback, you unquestionably have a chance to be one of college football's better teams. I expect Texas to be in the playoff.
Yeah, I think Texas is loaded, and Sark has that back to where Mac Brown had it, where they're going to expect to win double-digit games each and every season. Now, I'm glad EJ's over in Dublin because he'll actually go have a pint, maybe enjoy some of the food. Orlovsky would sit at his hotel and watch game tape. We sent the right guy there. The college football season kicks off Saturday. We have the first game of the year on ESPN in the app. Number 10, Florida State squares off against Georgia Tech. You know it, noon, Dublin. College Game Day crew begins the day, 9 a.m. Eastern, ESPN and ESPNU.